It was the beginning of fall when my friends and I decided to spend the weekend exploring the old Bell Farm in Adams, Tennessee. Adams is a small town known for its rich history and southern charm, but it's also infamous for its haunted past. The Bell Farm, with its overgrown fields and crumbling barn, was the heart of one of the most chilling ghost stories in American folklore, the legend of the Bell Witch. The Bell Witch is a tale rooted in the early 19th century. It's said that John Bell and his family, who settled in the area in the early 1800s, were tormented by a malevolent spirit that became known as the Bell Witch. The spirit was said to be responsible for strange noises, physical attacks, and ultimately, the death of John Bell himself. The story of the Bell Witch has fascinated and terrified people for generations, and we were eager to experience the legend firsthand. We arrived at the old Bell Farm just as the sun was beginning to set. The farm was a sprawling expanse of land with a dilapidated house and barn standing as the only remnants of its once thriving past. The property was overgrown with weeds, and the tall, dense trees seemed to close in on us as we made our way to the house. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and rotting wood, and the sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, giving the scene an otherworldly feel. The Bell House, now a shadow of its former self, was a two-story wooden structure with peeling paint and broken windows. The porch sagged under the weight of time, and the front door creaked ominously as we pushed it open. Inside, the house was musty and dark, with cobwebs draped across the corners and old furniture covered in dust. It felt as though we had stepped back in time, and the oppressive atmosphere made it clear that this place had seen more than its share of sorrow. We set up our base camp in what was once the main living area. We had brought along some flashlights, an old journal we found detailing the Bell Witch legend, and a few snacks. As we gathered around, we couldn't help but feel the weight of the story hanging over us. We decided to start our night by reading from the journal, hoping to understand the history and perhaps connect with the spirit. The journal described strange occurrences, inexplicable noises, like scratching and knocking, eerie, disembodied voices, and physical attacks on the Bell family. It was said that the Bell Witch had a particular vendetta against John Bell, often targeting him with harsh, sometimes violent pranks. The more we read, the more the atmosphere seemed to thicken with an unspoken tension. As night fell, we ventured outside to the old barn, where many of the most unsettling events were said to have occurred. The barn was even more decrepit than the house, its roof partially caved in and the walls riddled with holes. The wind howled through the gaps, making the barn creak and groan as if it were alive. We set up a few more candles and prepared to conduct a small seance, hoping to contact the Bell Witch. The wind outside picked up, rattling the barn's loose boards and causing the candles to flicker erratically. We gathered in a circle, holding hands and trying to remain calm. Ella, our resident ghost enthusiast, led the seance, calling out to the Bell Witch and asking if she was present. At first, nothing happened. The wind continued to howl, and the barn seemed to settle into a relative calm. But then, a sudden, sharp noise pierced the silence. It sounded like a loud bang followed by scratching, as if someone, or something, was dragging its fingers along the walls. The noise came from the far corner of the barn, where the old stalls stood in dark silhouette. We exchanged nervous glances, our breaths visible in the cold night air. The scratching noise grew louder, more persistent, and the candles flickered wildly. The atmosphere was electric, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to peer into the darkness, but the shadows were too dense to make out any details. Just then, a cold draft swept through the barn, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into darkness. The scratching noise stopped abruptly, replaced by a deep, guttural growl that seemed to come from every direction at once. We scrambled to relight the candles, but the wind was relentless, making it nearly impossible. When the candles were finally lit again, we saw that the barn had changed. The walls seemed to have new scratches and gouges, as if something had been clawing at them. We felt a sudden, intense cold that made us shiver, despite the warm night outside. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and I could sense an unseen presence surrounding us. Ella, her voice trembling, suggested we head back to the house. We quickly packed up our things and made our way through the dark fields, the wind howling around us and the trees creaking as if whispering secrets. The shadows seemed to follow us, and the sense of dread was almost palpable. When we finally reached the house, we huddled together, trying to shake off the lingering fear. The night felt endless, and every creak and groan of the old house seemed to echo the sinister presence we had encountered. We spent the rest of the night in uneasy silence, each of us trying to make sense of what we had experienced. As dawn approached, we packed up and left the Bell farm, our minds filled with the haunting memories of the night. The bell which had made her presence known, and the experience left us all deeply unsettled. The farm, with its dark history and eerie atmosphere, had given us a glimpse into a legend that was more than just a story. It was a chilling reminder of the unknown forces that can linger long after the past is gone. The Bell Farm remains a poignant chapter in the history of Adams, Tennessee. The legend of the bell which continues to captivate and terrify those who dare to seek out its truth. Our night at the farm was a stark reminder that some stories are not just folklore, they are warnings of the dark and mysterious forces that lie just beyond our understanding.